Well, welcome everyone. My name is Frederick Winsness, and I'm pleased to welcome everyone to another ICT4D webinar in our series with the NetOp Solutions Center. We're pleased to partner with Catholic Relief Services on this. Today we have an opportunity to look back a little bit, look at lessons learned from the 10th ICT4D Conference that took place in Lusaka in May. We have a host of partners with us, United Nations Capital Development Fund, DAI, SOS Children's Villages, IRC, and of course Catholic Relief Services. And Sonia, I'm going to keep you muted, and you too, Aloma. Before we get underway, I want to make sure that we go over housekeeping rules. So let's keep this as interactive as we can. You will be able to ask questions towards the end of the hour today, and please line those questions up in the chat window. So I suggest everybody opens up the chat window and watches the traffic there, as well as post your questions. And we'll hold the questions to the end, and we'll have a Q&A session between Sonia and myself. We are recording this session today, so look for an email to the link to where we're going to post the recording, as well as the slides we're presenting. And at the very end, you will see a webinar satisfaction poll, and we would certainly appreciate you answering those few questions in order to help us improve this session, these webinars going forward. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Sonia Rutzel. She is the ICT Conference Manager and with Catholic Relief Services. And Sonia, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can introduce the other speakers. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Frederick. Today we have expertise from our ICT4D conference sharing an overview. Our first speaker will be Steve Helen. He's the Director of ICT4D and GIS at Catholic Relief Services. We're also joined by Maria Beringer. She's the Global ICT4D Advisor at SOS Children's Villages International. Uloma Ogaba, the Project and Knowledge Manager at the United Nations Capital Development Fund, or UNCDF. We're also being joined by Chetna Kavala, the Technology Director of DAI Global Health, and Daniel Kaufling, the Deputy Director of ICT at International Rescue Committee. And before we start, we also have two polls we like to ask to our audience. So we have two questions for you we like to ask you now, and we will share the results at the end of this webinar together with other results taken from a survey that Steve will introduce. So our first audience poll, the question is, to what degree do digital tools benefit certain aspects of aid and development programs? So please choose one option that you think is your most likely option. Either it's timely data, higher quality data, improved program accountability, improved decision making, or cost savings. What would be your number one benefit? And the second question we have for you is, what is your biggest concern with ICT4D? So again, please choose one option, either information security or data privacy, retaining skilled staff, resistance to change, difficult aligning technology with improved project results, or return of investment is not compelling. And as I said, we'll share the answers with a broader results from a survey at the end of this webinar. Thank you very much. And that was our second question. So our first speaker is Steve Helen, and I will pass on the control to Steve so you can control your slides and introduce a survey.
Sonia, as long as the poll is going, I will need to keep control. So Steve, just please ask me to advance the slides for now.
Okay,
Great. Thanks, everyone, and good morning. So this was the 6th ICT4D conference that I've had an opportunity to attend. And each year, data is consistently a prominent topic, whether it's about data use to improve program efficacy, data analytics, big data, or otherwise. So kind of turning the tables a bit, I'm pleased to share this morning data about our own subsector, some trends and insights about ICT4D from the development community. Next slide. Catholic Relief Services commissioned DevX to conduct a survey, which we carried out in April of this year. It compiled responses from 619 senior development professionals coming from donor agencies, governments, NGOs, foundations, corporations, consulting firms, and quite a few independent consultants. And 85% of the survey respondents described themselves as senior or executive level development professionals. More than half said they drew most of their extensive experience from Africa. Next slide. The survey identified a pretty distinct difference between organizations who commonly use ICT and those who use it rarely. You'll see here that only 36% of organizations said they use technology in the majority or more than half of their projects. So to me, this shows that there's still a massive opportunity to use tech in more programs. We certainly see this opportunity at CRS and really have spent a great deal of effort in recent years focusing on tools that are more turnkey and simple enough that they can scale downward to smaller and shorter duration programs. Next slide. Here we asked about the degree of centralization versus decentralization when it comes to ICT4D support. And just over half of respondents said they either have a centralized ICT4D unit or are working towards it. So that's the left and the bottom part of the pie chart, the light orange and the light gray. And one of the things that I heard as a theme at the conference was a big emphasis on data privacy and information security. And I'm really happy to see that our sector is finally beginning to take this seriously. A key takeaway for me from the conference is that privacy and security really require some degree of centralized ICT4D support and control. Next slide. Closely following that last question about a centralized support function is this question around standard tools. So you'll see that 44% of those surveyed said they use different software and devices across the organization, and each project or each team is free to make decisions as they see fit, as opposed to only 28% who say that they choose from a centrally defined set of tools that are supported by the organization and don't have the liberty to choose other options. And a recurring message that I heard at the conference is that if our sector is truly going to shift the needle on data privacy, it's going to require giving up some autonomy. Some standardization and some management controls truly are prerequisite for effective information security. Next slide. The acting Minister of Transport and Communications opened the conference on behalf of the Zambian president, and he praised the international development community for how we're using technology to improve the lives of those in need. If I may quote him, he said that new GIS technology, monitoring mechanisms, and data management inventions are creating endless possibilities, generating sustainable growth and everlasting hope for a blissful future. And so I'm not surprised to see any of these responses as the top 5 enablers of what makes a culture of data use. But clearly, based on the top response, there's still a need for simpler, more accessible data collection and analysis tools in order to fully realize the vision of using data to improve program efficacy. The conference truly brought together technology vendors and development practitioners who are working in partnership to address needs like this to simplify and make easier these tool sets. Next slide.
Steve, you now have control, so you can advance your own slide.
Great, thank you. Okay, on this slide we asked about the trends that will positively impact the aid and development sector over the coming years. And I'm really encouraged by the popularity that connectivity and those ultra low-cost smartphones were noted to positively impact our sector in the years ahead. Connectivity has been and continues to be a main driver of change and impact. This means getting the internet and really capable devices to those first mile communities, which are currently disconnected, but who could benefit immensely from information on things like severe weather warnings to education on health and agriculture. What I heard as a big conversation topic at the conference this year was a shift from an impact about mobile phones generally to much bigger emphasis on smartphones. And the trend has been moving in this direction rapidly. In 2016, there were 200 million smartphones in Africa, and by 2020, that number will reach 500 million. And maybe a last point on this slide is that towards the bottom, you'll see artificial intelligence and machine learning, and this really was an emerging topic at this year's conference. And my own prediction is that this will really quickly grow in prominence for ICT4D practitioners. So let me turn next to Maria to talk about the results from the education track.
Thank you very much, Steve. So I think that I have, yeah, exactly, the control of the slides. Perfect. So hello, everybody. I am working in SOS Children Villages as Global ICT for Development Advisor, leading the area of ICT4D in the organization at international level. I had the chance to be also like one of the attendees and speakers of the last ICT4D conference in Zambia, in Lusaka. And this for me is the third conference that I attend. And I also participated co-leading the education and livelihood track together with Team Unwind and Miroslav. So in this slide, we compiled some of the key themes at the conference regarding education and livelihood track that we would like to share with you, and later on, if you want to discuss them further or question, I am more than happy to continue conversations. So the main topics were around the importance and benefits of designing the projects with program participants. It was quite nice to hear the importance that every day more and more organizations are highlighting on the design of the programs together with the program participants and not very far from the ground in order to ensure that the impact and the investments that we are doing will have like an impact and outcome on the beneficiaries. Also, it was highlighted the big importance of the use of ICT in supporting the refugees, as, for example, establishing ICT corners, so people, when they arrive into the refugee camp, can have like some kind of connection to their families and communication. Also, in developing employability skills for those people that are in the refugee camps, or developing skills also, various skills on education topics or digital skills. Then again, we talked on a recurrent theme on all this conference around the years, which was around the monitoring and evaluation and how to really get data which can prove successfully or which can prove the impact that ICT integration in education has. Also, a big thing was about mentorship and how ICT can break geographical and also time barriers and bring closer mentors and mentees, and how everyday organizations are using more platforms and more this kind of ICT integration and mentorship program. And then the last thing, but also very important, it was around IT training and digital literacy. And I might say that this was I think that this was the main topic on education. How to better train on IT, the importance of having literate people on ICT and digital literacy. Some of the lessons learned from the discussions that we would like to share with you. As I said in the slide before, one of the main themes was around design, human-centered design, and how to really design successfully, putting the user in the center. And when I say user, it's not only the human that is going to participate in the project, but also the local circumstances and infrastructure that surrounds these program participants. So we do not design a solution very far from the ground, and then we hope that it will work in one country, or we assume that it will work, but we really design with program participants. And this is very nice when we say it, but it does not happen a lot, or in most of the cases, but we will need to do it more and more, not only in the theory, but also in the practice. This comes also related with the let's be agile, but not only because agile now sounds okay, but because agile really works in this kind of solutions. So let's design quite quickly with program participants, test, and then see what worked and what failed, but then really look at what failed and learn from that. So if we failed, why? And let's take these learnings to redesign, redeploy, retest, and implement again. So we really can design and implement a solution which is really meaningful for the people, for the vulnerable communities with whom we work, and that is really making an impact on their lives, and that they feel that this is something useful for them. And then finally, also, and what Steve said before about data protection, but also a lot of highlights were happening around challenges or damages, let's say, that this quick integration of ICT sometimes brings with. So, for example, things as cyberbullying, harassment, data literacy, digital rights. These are topics that more and more should be present in our programs, in our organizations, because the more we integrate technology in the programs, the more challenges about cyberbullying, harassment, digital literacy, etc. we will have. So these are things that need to evolve together and hand in hand. Thank you very much. And now I pass to Uloma.
Thank you very much, Maria. Uloma, you have control over your slides as well. Thank you.
Sonia said, my name is Uloma, and I work as a project and knowledge manager for UNCDF based in Lusaka, Zambia. So when we were approached by the ICT4D conference organizers to join the conference as the track leads for the digital financial inclusion track, we were really excited because we saw this as an opportunity to shine a light on the work that's being done in Zambia, but to also invite experts and practitioners from around the world to share lessons learned from implementing digital finance projects in different countries. So in our track, we ended up having over 20 presentations, and we saw a range of stakeholders from the private sector, from development partners, and also from the regulators present their ideas, their solutions, and different innovations that they were working on. And I think some of the themes that emerged where first and foremost, which was encouraging, is that digital financial services could be a significant driver for financial inclusion in many markets. We're starting to see, including in Zambia, I think between the last financial inclusion survey that was done in 2015, where financial inclusion in Zambia was at about 60%, that number has now increased. And what we're seeing is that digital finance has played a key role in driving the improvements that we're seeing in financial inclusion. So that was very encouraging. And I think that led to the next point on the importance of developing solutions that address the needs and wants of the different customer groups in the market. And I think the speaker before me talked about human-centered design, and so that was also a big theme that emerged at the conference in our track, was how different providers are taking into account the fact that it's to their benefit to use the data that they have to segment their customer groups, because it is possible to serve specific user groups with very specific needs with tailored digital financial inclusion solutions. So I think there was an example of work being done with refugees, developing digital finance solutions for refugees at one of the camps in Zambia. And what we're seeing is that even among a group like this, you could think with very low income, there's still a opportunity to introduce financial services to them that have the potential to improve their overall financial health. And we're starting to see results like that. And the next theme that emerged was the increasing role that innovation will have to play in driving digital financial inclusion. And we're already starting to see that with the emergence of fintechs in different markets. There was a presentation by a provider named Zazu, and they are marketing themselves as the digital bank of the future. And again, saying if mobile phone penetration is increasing in a lot of markets in the developing world, including smartphone penetration is starting to increase, and how can we leverage these different solutions that are available to us to improve the way that we the opportunities for people in low income and developing countries to access financial services. And the last point, the last theme that emerged was the increased need for more collaboration across the sector and even beyond the digital financial inclusion sector. So what we saw a lot of solutions that were cross-cutting. So while they might appear to be digital finance solutions, they actually address pain points in different sectors, so including health, including agriculture, including education. We saw an example of a development partner that's working with a government institution to digitize school fee payments for women who were part of a savings group. So we're starting to see innovations like that, and the ability for digital finance and mobile money to cut across different sectors and help us start to see more innovative and second-generation products that address, meaning that customers are also starting to want to move beyond just being able to send and receive payments. They also want access to insurance, to credit, to savings that they can access through digital channels. And in terms of lessons learned, I think I already mentioned what we're seeing is that digital financial services have a role to play in advancing financial inclusion, and they can do this in ways that are faster and more cost-effective. But this hinges on the types of partnerships that we are able to drive. So if you say it might be more cost-effective in some cases for digital finance providers to partner with non-digital financial service providers rather than trying to assume that burden. For instance, with digitizing the school fee payments or farmer input subsidies, rather than the digital finance provider assuming a role and a technical specialty that they do not have, it's in their best interest to partner with another provider that has this technical expertise to develop a solution that actually works and can address the challenge and the problem that they're trying to solve. Another lesson that we learned was a lot of focus is being paid now to how women are accessing and using digital financial services. So we're starting to see in a lot of markets, including Zambia, including India, and there are examples from Uganda, specialized solutions that are being tailored to meet the needs of women because providers are recognizing that they are a significant customer base, so it's in their best interest to develop solutions that are tailored to meet them. But typically in most markets, women have less education and less training on how to use digital financial services. So there is a big push and in developing financial literacy campaigns that address this need for women. And I think that ties again into the last point, again, about partnerships. We heard that over and over. And then someone pointed out, I think even on the last day of the conference, that the regulators and the government seem to kind of be in the background or absent from the conversation. But if all of these solutions are being developed in markets that the governments are the ones who create this enabling environment for these solutions to flourish, then it's to the benefit of the digital financial services ecosystem to invite the government and the regulators into the conversations as early as possible so that we can get their input and approval on all the solutions that are being developed. So I think these were some of the key lessons and themes that emerged in the digital financial inclusion track. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're now trying to reach Chetna for the next talk.
Yeah, let me see if I can get her unmuted here. Give me 1 second.
Okay. In the meantime, thank you very much for posting the questions. If we're not getting through all of the questions today, we will aim to put together a Q&A document and see if we can get some answered after the webinar. So please do engage in the chat room.
Well, let's see if we can hear from Chetna now. Chetna, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And I'm going to advance the
Great.
slides, so let me know when you want to go to the next slide.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am Chetna Chawla. I am the Technology Director with DAI Global Health. We in DAI Global Health, we are working on a lot of digital solutions in health, including HMIS for data collection, a lot of emphasis on data use, different ways of data collection, including mobile technologies, social media, WhatsApp, and also a lot of emphasis on how to use the data. We have also been, emphasizing at the design stage on how to involve users from the design stage itself rather than having to go through the entire process and, creating solution that at times is not user-friendly and has less acceptance. And this has worked very well. So during the conference, we shared, our experiences and our thoughts on the human-centered design. And as far as the health and nutrition track is concerned, the key themes that we were focused, that the conference focused on was digital health being able to address non-communicable diseases. As everybody may be aware, that NCDs is an emerging issue and a challenge that most of the countries are now facing, and there is a very serious issue around being an ability to actually identify in the first place and then follow up on the treatments. So there are multiple solutions and pilots that have been conducted to support early detection, treatment, and tracking of NCDs using private and public sectors, service providers. And there has also been many commendable attempts to link the beneficiaries with the social security schemes to enable them to avail services free of cost and through their insurance, national insurance. While the degree of successes of these pilots have been varied. There's a very clear trend established of use of the ICT supportive tools for NCDs. In fact, we have seen some very fantastic pilots in India and Thailand around the implementation of these digital tools at the community level, training the community workers with mobile tools and integrated with diagnostic equipment to directly transfer the data and link them to the private and public sector providers near to their residents. So in these such solutions, typically the community health workers play a very, very key role in engaging all the beneficiaries. Another key topic that emerged during discussions was integrated health data and the challenges around data ownership and data privacy. This is obviously a very contentious issue. We, as solution providers, oftentimes go and develop systems. However, these systems, once developed, there are always challenges around ownership, not just of the data, but also the systems that are developed. So there was a lot of debate and points to ponder around several aspects of data ownership that include whether data that is being collected by the various actors, who is actually the owner of those data, because at times the data points of collection are various, and when you integrate the data into one data warehouse, who actually owns those various data sources. Second is that who has an ability to access the data, especially because health data, and especially diseases like HIV, TB, etc., have issues around data privacy. What is the level of access and the spread of access of such data, which at times is indeed very private. And given that issues around data privacy, another key aspect is about data storage. As there are many countries who have national policies around data, sensitive data not being hosted outside countries. So there have to be clear strategy around how and where the data is actually stored, especially if you're using standard applications. There can be potential issues around data privacy. Another aspect that was very key was around responsibility of managing and securing the data, and who is the one who can actually interpret the data and use the data for decision making. One aspect that was definitely that kept coming up in the conference was that while there are several innovations in health, including in Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and machine learning coming in, there is the key core issue is that when all these solutions are being implemented, what happens to the data that actually is getting collected and how is it being used? And this is not just about data privacy and data ethics, but also about building a culture of data use within the entire health sector machinery, especially the ministries, so that all the effort that is going around, increasing the spread and access of data is actually brings the benefit or true benefit of the entire process as a tangible indicator of how things should be done. in terms of lessons learned, there are clearly trends around implementation, because during the conference there were many solutions that were presented and many pilots. Some of them did varied degrees of successes. However, oftentimes it has been seen that we go ahead and do pilots, and oftentimes they are very successful, but then there is an issue scaling up, especially because at times there's a limited capacities within the ministry themselves to be able to take over the solutions and scale them up, and oftentimes it also happens that the project scope itself is about a limited pilot. This does result in multiple solutions being developed and not really being used effectively because of these barriers. All the stakeholders, including the funding agencies and the implementing partners, realize this, and the trend is now changing towards transitioning from pilots to large-scale nationwide developments. Typically here, what we are looking at, and this is something at DAI we have ourselves been doing of late, is prepare at the stage of development and design, have a very exhaustive trial runs with users. However, when we do a rollout, focus on doing a national rollout at one go. While this requires a lot of effort in terms of trainings, in terms of ramping up the infrastructure, it does have its own benefits, because then the impact is very clearly large scale, and the results that we see are much more wider than you see in a pilot. Second aspect that has been that has really come out of the conference is that now increasingly, while till a few years back, more emphasis was on data collection. However, now the emphasis is moving from data collection to data utilization, and therefore the emphasis at one end is on an ability to actually ensure that the data that is being collected is high quality data. So there needs to be a routine data collection audits, and routine data quality assessments, followed by building a culture of data use. How you build this culture of data use is ensuring, one, that you have first a good quality data that is available to the users, and second, building tools, and very easy to use tools that can help them do their regular business without any additional effort. And this brings to the third learning that clearly comes out is the user-centric design. That is because ultimately, whatever efforts we make in ICT, it is towards delivery and effective and efficient delivery of programs, and therefore we cannot go ahead and develop technologies and tools that are very highly technical in nature, not easy to use. Technology needs to be an enabler for programs and not the other way around. And that is where the early engagement of users is a very effective way of ensuring success of any ICT implementation. And that is why it is at the design stage itself that users have to be very closely engaged throughout the process of design, development, and implementation to make those programs successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Daniel, I might like to ask you to share the takeaways from the humanitarian response track for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia, and thanks, Chetna. My name is Daniel Coughlin. I'm the Deputy Director of ICT4 Programs at the International Rescue Committee. And along with Mohit Holmshuren and Ida Sorbet, organized the humanitarian track at the ICT4D Conference in Lusaka. So there were several themes that emerged from the humanitarian track. I'm just going to focus on a couple. The theme of data, which I'll probably repeat a few of the things that some of the other speakers mentioned, but this has been really a huge issue for the humanitarian sector over the last couple of years, and particularly during the run-up to the GDPR implementation. So in general, the sort of kind of emerging trends really have to do with our compliance and legal responsibilities around the GDPR, as well as national laws regarding data management, but also our own internal policies around beneficiary protection. This has really emerged, I think, as a result of basically the new amounts of rigor that we have to have around the individual data management required by cash programming, and specifically our digital cash transfer programs. We also have such a greater amount of digital data collection in general, where we're collecting ever increasing amounts of specific data around our beneficiaries. So we need to balance this data collection and the value that we get out of that data collection around how we can measure our effectiveness or improving our decision making with our protection standards, but also what we can get as a sector through transparency and sharing of the data. Next theme was really around the development of a plug-and-play technology stack for the humanitarian sector. So the costs associated with working with a range of technology providers and the costs on developing individual solutions for specific programs really results in you know, a lot of reproduction of effort and a wastage of resources. So a theme that's emerging is first the use of common technologies, or the use and reuse of common technologies between programs, as well as the development of a common technology stack that can be reused by different actors in the humanitarian sector. The importance of mapping came through in a couple of different talks, and really what we got to see was, I think, the promise and power of using the right mix of social technologies and leveraging the crowd to create immediate life-saving effects. So we had a couple of talks around the Missing Maps project and showing how basically how volunteer actors can create maps using low-cost technology that then can be leveraged by public health medical personnel throughout the developing world. Finally, on the mobile money and digital cash transfer area, so this is really an evolving area and becoming one of the bigger aspects of humanitarian sector. And what we're seeing is just the increased professionalization of this practice, the use of common technologies, but also the development of staff and training to really professionalize this kind of subsector in our industry. So I'll just move on now to the lessons learned. So we understand that and very time consuming.
Yeah, Daniel, your audio is getting very choppy here. I wonder, could you make sure that your headset is plugged in? Can you hear us? Yeah, Sonia, are you having the same issue?
Yes, I do. I thought it was my headset.
Okay.
So Daniel, we have problems understanding you.
So what I suggest we do, I'm going to mute Daniel. I'll talk to him in chat, and why don't we move on to Q&A since we really can't hear Daniel.
Okay, good idea. So thank you for posting questions. I know we're a bit short on time, but we like to take a couple of questions and then also see if we can get Daniel's lessons learned back to share with this group. The first question we had was for Maria. It's a question. In your presentation, you talked about engaging the users during program implementation. At what level do you engage the stakeholders, and what type of stakeholders do you normally engage with in your project design? So now, Maria, if you maybe have an answer to this question.
Yeah, so in general, because of course, like it depends a lot on the project, but in general, we look for global project implementation, so which can work in different countries, in different regions, so then it's easier to scale. So then in the design, we for sure engage with our local offices, which are going to be the ones in charge of implementing the project. And then, of course, and more important, with a sample of program participants, we create focus groups and invite them on the very beginning of the project design. And then if the project also has some links with government action, regulations, funding, etc., so we also try to make a link, not on the very first beginning, but on a second stage of the program. But the most important ones, let's say like the users or the program participants or beneficiaries who are going to really use the project or implement it.
Thank you very much. We have a question for Uloma, and I know you're at UNCDF Zambia, so I'm wondering if this is something where we need to share maybe a web link for. The question is, how are you planning on delivering digital finance to women in the Middle East? Is this something we should look at a web link, or? Sure, we're good with the audio. Okay.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, hi, Sonia. So, yeah, I think I can't necessarily speak for the Middle East, but I could speak to Zambia and the other program countries where UNCDF is active. In Zambia specifically, what we've done is start with research. So basically trying to understand, in Zambia, I think women make up about 51% of the population. And so it's trying to understand who these women are, where they're located, what their specific needs and challenges are. So women in the rural areas are going to have different needs from women in urban areas, but they all still could potentially benefit from having access to some sort of digital finance solution. So what we actually did was we started by commissioning research to understand who women in Zambia, and then based on that research, we got a few potential products solutions that came out of that. So what we've gone back to do is we've organized different focus group discussions in different regions of the country, calling together different groups of women. So one of the solutions that came out actually was the idea of digitizing school fee payments, because that was one of the needs that women identified during this research. So that's actually a solution being piloted. Another solution was if there's a possibility to digitize savings groups, or if you could link digital savings to increase access to loans for women who wanted to start small businesses. So I think there's a lot of work being done in that area already. So starting with the research, understanding who these women are, what their needs are, developing targeted solutions, and then piloting those solutions with the women themselves to see what works and what can be scaled up. So in Zambia, I think Mercy4 is also active, and they do a lot of work with women developing digital finance solutions for women farmers. So I think that work is already being done in Zambia and in other markets across Africa, and I'm sure it could be, these are lessons learned that could be used to design solutions for women in the Middle East.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Daniel, are you luckier with your audio?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Shall we just go back to the last slide, and you could share your last lesson learned with us?
Sure. So basically the last two items that I was discussing, the first was the support services are as important as technology design. So really making sure that your project design for your technology implementation includes how you'll be supporting and maintaining that technology over time. Then finally, just kind of circling back to data protection, the thoughts that we are basically communicating out how we are protecting data so that our communities, beneficiaries, and other stakeholders understand what we are doing in order to maintain the data protection standards that basically the public is becoming more and more aware of and more demanding of us to maintain.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have one last question I'd like to ask to Steve. The question is, when digital tools are being introduced in development, do you feel that government and the public sector are leading the way or catching up in the areas of both technologies as well as regulation?
Sure. So let me answer the latter part of that first. So in the area of regulation, the answer is clearly catching up, and this is true, I think, globally, whether we're talking about in developing world context or elsewhere, that the rate of change in technology is far outpacing the ability to regulate that technology. In terms of the other part of the question of being, is government leading digital initiatives versus playing catch up, I think that part varies quite dramatically by location and by the specific policies that have been put in place either to encourage the use of digital tools or in some cases policies that hinder or inhibit. And that spans a pretty wide gamut from areas where there's maybe more of an authoritarian approach to digital solutions where access to information is more tightly controlled, to places that countries have put in place environment or have helped to nurture environments that really move some of these initiatives forward more quickly.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Before we like to share the poll results from our two audience questions, I'd like to thank all our speakers here very much for their oversight. I know it is a challenge to summarize a 3-day conference in less than 60 minutes. And I also like to thank our other partners, DIAL and the partners from the agricultural conference track to obviously be part of the event. And we will share a post-event report with some of the content later on this summer. So now I'll just like to share the results from our poll. I think we took it at the beginning of the webinar, so I know not everybody was able to fill it out, but it gives us an idea. And I also wanted to share slides from the survey that Steve introduced earlier. I'm not sure we can do that. If we go to the next slide. So the first question was, to what degree do digital tools benefit certain aspects of aid and development programs? You can see on the slide that particular timely data and higher quality of data were on the first places. However, all were very important benefits, with sort of cost saving just being not far behind on the fifth place. And I think here we have a little bit more variation. Here, timely data was in the first place, improved decision making on the second place, and cost savings was further behind, which could just be a different makeup of our audience, obviously. And just to quickly share the next question, that was, what's your biggest concern with ICT4D? So information security and data privacy was the main concern, followed by retaining skilled staff, resistant to change, and then difficulties aligning technology with improved project results, and then the return of investment at the last positions. In our call, we had the return of investment and also retaining staff quite far away from the other concerns. So our main concern here was difficult aligning technology with improved project results. So there's a higher discrepancy here from our audience. But I hope you find those results interesting. We will share a link to the overall survey that CRS conducted together with DevEx, and we also will share those details as well as the slides and the recording in a wrap-up. I think we're at the end of our 60 minutes. We have also a webinar survey we'd like to ask you to briefly fill out to give us some feedback. And if you can just also have the last slides, then I can also put 2 dates into your calendar. The next ICT4D webinar as part of this series will be in September. We were looking at ICT4D at scale, sharing case studies from the conference as well as new content. And then also to mark in your calendar, next year's ICT4D conference, that's going to be the 11th edition already, will be a week earlier than this year, so from April 30th to May 3rd in Kampala in Uganda. And thank you very much as well to NetHope for facilitating us again, and I very much hope to hear or see you all virtually again in September.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Thanks for putting these on. It's delightful for NetHope to be able to host these for you. So I want to thank the audience for excellent questions, and the panelists today for very, very informative presentations. So thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be back in touch soon.